I don't know, well, I've just hit go live, so there won't be anyone here. And welcome to sunny Glasgow. Anyway, I'm just heading down the road, and I thought I would come on and say a few words, see if I can wrap up this week somehow. I'm not entirely sure how long I'll be doing these types of things. What happened is, a few months ago, I just got rid of my car. I never even sold it. I basically just gave it away, and it's now scrapped. Gave it to the mechanic, and he said he's going to scrap the thing. And I've been doing a lot of walking since, and I've kind of enjoyed it, but I don't know. I can see that the weather has started to change, and the novelty of walking everywhere has started to wear off a little bit. So maybe I'll get a car again, I don't know. A local mechanic was good enough to make a little deal with me that if I build a sort of mini booking system thing, then he would give me a car plus, I think it was $450, not much. And I don't know, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll make that happen, I don't know. On the other hand, maybe I'll keep on walking. It's not the worst thing in the world. Anyway, I heard the news that they got somebody for this Charlie Kirk thing. And I'm really glad, and I'm really glad that we never allowed ourselves to go down some ridiculous conspiracy type route, There were whispers a few days ago that this whole thing was Mossad, and I could see a few people in my inner circle were jumping on board that thing. And I did a little bit of looking into this. There was a video from Dr. Ted Grande in which he said that actually, now I don't know much about shooting guns, I've never even held a gun, but people who know about this were saying, look, that's actually quite an easy shot, and all of this stuff about you have to be a professional, etc., a trained marksman, that apparently has turned out to be nonsense. And as soon as I looked into the details, and I could see sloppiness there and everywhere, and I just thought to myself, this is no Mossad thing. This is just one of these woke morons, possibly from the trans mob, the trans mafia. It was obvious to me, and I left a post to that effect. It was either yesterday or the day before yesterday, and I'm glad that I was able to pull people back from the old let's blame the Jews for everything schedule, because it seems that it wasn't anything to do with Netanyahu and all of that. It seems like it was, in fact, just what we all thought. And there you go. Now I have a little comment came in from Keith. Welcome. Oh, hi DC. Oh, hello to you. Nice to see you. Can you hear me okay? I apologise for the picture being a bit rubbish. If it's any consolation, the picture's kind of rubbish here as well in real life. It's a very murky and miserable evening here. It looks like it could start raining at any second. The ground's already wet, actually. So I'm walking as fast as I can. Pardon me. Can hear you. 10 bells. Thank you, thank you. I had to stop to read it there because the font is so small. I'm just holding a very cheap rubbish phone here, and you know, it's a challenge to read the fonts, it's so small. But thank you for that, and very nice to have you here. So, now that they've got somebody for the Charlie Kirk thing, I mean, what a week. What a week. Early on in the week, I believe it was September 8th, my wee cat Coco died. I'm absolutely devastated. Coco made it to 23 years old, and life will never be the same. I don't see any prospect of me getting another pet. I don't think I could ever go through that again. But I have full respect for people who do have pets. But for me, it's just, the whole thing was just devastating, actually. And as a matter of fact, I'm probably going to move out of the place that I'm in because it's too depressing for me, you know. That was Coco's little place, so I'll probably be moving out soon. So I had that, and then, of course, a day or two afterwards, we had the video of the Ukrainian gal who was so brutally well, you know what happened to her on that train. You don't need me to remind you. But of course, I can remind you what it was for. Nothing at all. And I have no doubt that they're all going to be blaming mental illness or whatever. It just so happens I have a very, very good friend who has suffered from schizophrenia. A brilliant programmer, by the way. And he and I have spoken at length about the symptoms of schizophrenia. And he was good enough to talk to me about this. This was like a few months ago. And it turns out that one of the symptoms is hearing voices, you know. And you cannot ascertain if the voices are real, like audio voices, or if they're just in your head. And imagine that. I mean, you really would not be able to function if this happened. Some people have hallucinations, and it's a terrible, debilitating and ghastly condition. It's almost like hell, as far as I can tell. I'm speaking about schizophrenia here. However, as bad as it is, I fail to see any combination of words that could lead to somebody or justify what happened in Charlotte on that train and what that guy did to that Ukrainian. There is no combination of words, there is no amount of voices, real or otherwise, that in any way excuses that. And one of the reasons why the world is so messed up is because people don't take responsibility anymore. They're always blaming things, blaming other people, pointing fingers at everybody except themselves, you know. Anyway, of course, we then had the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So that's 3 very heavy events in 1 week, for me at least. The death of my cat, the incident on the train, and the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Any one of those, even at the best of times, would have rattled me. But to have these three major things back to back to back. It's a very, very heavy week, and it really rattled me. So, as Axl Rose from the band Guns N' Roses said, where do we go now? I think there is actually a sort of turning point happening, if you'll allow the phrase. I'm sure I'm not the only person who's done that. But I think people have had enough. And I think that one of the things that got us into this mess, whereby some completely wholesome dude, you know, hardcore Christian, family man. I mean, you might disagree with what he said, but he was certainly not a man of violence. And we're now at the stage where a guy like him, who says we have to keep talking, you know, we have to engage in debate. And what happened? They could not defeat him in a fair debate, so they shot him. And I think that you're going to see a lot of people calling for calm and we need to keep talking and all of that stuff. Let me tell you where I am. And this is going to be a little bit controversial. Now hold on, I'll just read the chat. Hello, Gear, nice to see you. And hello to you. I can't see the names, the font's too small. But I can recognise Giro's icon. Nice to see you. Charlie was light in the darkness. Absolutely. He was a hero, and I'm actually, if you've watched my channel really closely, I posted a short that was to do with Charlie Kirk. I may have said Charlie Veitch there. Charlie Veitch is good as well, by the way. But Charlie Kirk, I posted a little short video because I discovered Charlie Kirk a couple of, maybe 3 months ago or something. And I had no idea who he was. He appeared on the feed and I was so impressed. And I ended up spending about 2 days just watching his debates. And he was an intellectual powerhouse. I phoned my friend Nicky. I was like, have you seen this guy? Absolutely brilliant. And like I say, I even posted a little video a few months ago, and like an idiot, I took it down because I didn't want to be political. But I regret taking it down. And I suppose this is one of the things that has come out of this. You're going to get a lot of people saying, you know, the sort of classic heal the world Michael Jackson angle. And oh, this is the time to engage in all of that and to choose peace. Well, I think that's bullshit. Charlie Kirk chose peace. He chose dialogue and he chose to engage. And look what they did to him. I have a question. Do you think that you can debate better than him? Do you think you can have the energy to go and tour all of those universities and do a better job than him? Do you think that you can play the part of the wholesome Christian dude better than him? Well, I don't know about you, but I certainly cannot. So we have tried, or at least through people like Charlie Kirk, We've tried fair debate, and what happened? They shot him. And I mentioned Charlie Veach, the other Charlie on YouTube, who's very popular. And the last time I saw him, all he does is walks about the street and points cameras and shows you what's going on. And the amount of times I've seen him, even just the other week, last week, and he had a mob just shouting Nazi scum off our street. And every time he was trying to say something, they would just all shout Nazi scum off our street over and over and over. And at the time, I thought, well, they're shutting down debate. They're closing any opportunity of debate, and it's all a little bit uncivilized. But then, following the events in Utah, I've now come to realise that they're not really shutting down debate. What they're doing is much worse than that. And I'm not the first person to make this observation. If you can convince a group of people that somebody like Charlie Kirk, let's say, is a fascist or a literal Nazi, then what you're doing is you're saying, hey everybody, it's okay to kill him. And is it any wonder that there are, so I've heard, I can't watch it because I haven't got the stomach, but I've heard reliable reports that there are multitudes of woke weirdos celebrating his death and gloating and saying, who's next? Who's next? You know, let's go for Ben Shapiro and things like that. This is absolutely disgraceful, and it's only made possible by a few key ingredients being added in just the right quantity at just the right time. The first ingredient is tolerance. Let's all be tolerant of the insanity. Let's all pretend that it's perfectly reasonable for a man to wake up one day, declare himself female, and then compete in women's sports. Yeah, let's all pretend that that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, and we'll just tolerate that. So we got tolerant. The next thing is, the next ingredient, an out of control media. And even now they're all saying, the news, because I heard it on my device, the right-wing activist, Charlie Kirk. He was not a right-wing activist. I think he was a conservative. I think he was a pretty mainstream kind of a guy. I certainly don't think that he was radical. But this is what the news are doing, along with the politicians as well, I have to say. And the third ingredient, of course, is the one I've mentioned, where we all get in the habit of calling somebody an ist or an obe or hateful or a bigot or a fascist or a literal Nazi if they say something that the woke don't like. That's where we are. And I don't know how else to tell you. So, the way I see it, and I'm not on a crusade to convince anybody of anything, I'm just giving you my personal opinion here. But my personal opinion on all of this is that I kind of feel as if there's no point in trying to negotiate with the woke. There's no point in trying to reason with the woke. There's no point in trying to persuade them. It's just a waste of time. And so I'm not going to waste my time. I think they're lost, actually. Forgive me for going a wee bit quiet. I don't like saying I'm in a rough area in case somebody lives here, but sometimes when you're out in Glasgow, there are certain areas where you just want to be a little bit careful, you know. And there was a few people appeared, and I just want to just make sure I'm okay, you know, and have my eyes on the streets. Anyway, I don't see any point in engaging with them at all. They're gone, you know. But I do see a huge incentive to engage with young people, you know. Forget about the kind of lost millennial types. They're absolutely gone. But I think that Charlie Kirk was doing exactly the right thing with exactly the right demographic. And I'm not the man for the job, unfortunately. But I hope that there is an absolute swarm of people who go to these universities, which are just indoctrination camps as far as I can tell, and do what Charlie Kirk was doing, you know? And we have to restore virtue, you know? Honourable conduct. Call it whatever you will. But we seem to have lost that, and we've come up with this horrible sort of entitlement culture, and it's utterly disgusting, you know? Now, I actually think that this is something that I understand, because I've thought about it, and I you know, it's not so long since I was young, and I think that I can understand why a guy like Charlie Kirk would be repulsive to a lot of young people, because young people, especially when they cross the age of, I would say, moving into their early 30s, they have this kind of mini breakdown where they suddenly realise that they're not going to be rock stars, they're not going to be movie stars or astronauts, they're probably not going to be president or anything. In fact, they're going to possibly live pretty mundane, uninteresting lives, you know. So I think that is a horrible moment of truth for a lot of young people. And I've gone through that, by the way. You know, myself, when I was young, I was a full-time runner for a while. You'd never know it. But I had grants and stuff, and I was in the local papers, and people were saying he's going to the Olympics. Well, so much for that. But I remember the realisation that it wasn't going to happen, and it was quite heavy. I climbed a mountain at the time to get my head around it. And when young people see somebody like Charlie Kirk, who represents family life, you know, to be married, to be in a monogamous relationship with kids and all of that, well, some of us look at that and say, well, that's great. But there's a lot who say, man, that sounds completely boring and miserable, and, you know, whatever happened to Wembley Stadium? And I think that this is one of the reasons why that kind of message, a message of conservatism, is so disgusting for young people. Because that conservative message, and of course I'm not talking about the Conservative Party, I mean the general concept. And that whole idea, I think it's something, I don't know, is the word repugnant, repulsive, something like that. But I think it's the worst possible message for a lot of young people out there, because in order to give them that message from their perspective, you're sort of asking them to come to terms with the fact that they're not going to live exceptional lives, you know, and that's a very, very heavy thing. So I suppose there might be some type of opportunity to present young people with a more rounded version, or a more rounded type of philosophy or something that says, look, you don't need to necessarily be a Christian and, you know, do this and do that and have a wife and 4 kids or whatever. Best of luck to those who do, but you don't need to. We can all conduct ourselves in a more upstanding manner, you know. We can all embrace concepts like extreme accountability and things like that. These are all things that are available for everybody. And so, I don't know, maybe there's something in that. What way am I going to go here? Shawlands? Yeah, maybe I'll go through Shawlands. How am I doing for power? I'm trying my best to read the comments here, and I'm afraid they're a wee bit too small. I do apologise. If you want me to read your comments, I know it's really silly, but you're going to have to write in capital letters. This is no joke. I'm just not able to read it, it's too small. I'm holding a little phone here, and it's just not working for me. Anyway, moving on. I think that we who are in the UK have a huge challenge because we don't really have freedom of speech anymore, and it's a very, very heavy thing. But personally speaking, I'm reaching a point where I don't really care. I just don't know if I can play along with this thing anymore, you know. Anyway, well, I had this thing I was going to do where if somebody ever walks up to me and says, "Are you the online equalizer?" I'll give them £100. I think we should do that. That'd be a cool little challenge, wouldn't it? Well, I'm going to a busy area here, so maybe we could. So if you know anybody in this area, which is completely unnamed, yeah, let's have a bit of fun. If anybody walks up to me and says, "Are you the online equalizer?" No, that's not what I'm called. It's the Glasgow Equalizer. That's my name. If anybody asks me that, I'll give them £100. But it's not going to happen. I'm very unpopular. Anyway, oh, we have a capital letters comment. Thank you. It says, the joke is that you can say what you want once. Thank you. Thank you very much. The font is so small I can't even read your name, but I appreciate that, and I apologise if I never read it out properly. Once again, the phone here is really small, and I do struggle to read the comments here. I know that the picture's rubbish as well. Anyway, I'm not really in the mood to start preaching or being a political guy or telling people how they should live their lives or anything. I can tell you that I've been approached and asked if I would participate in a project, and it's to do with online conduct. Now, I tell you what, I'm going to describe this to you guys, and I would be really grateful if you could tell me if this is a good idea or a bad idea. It's going to take me 2 minutes, okay? So lend me your ears, and here we go. So, some of you know this about me already, but a long time ago I used to work for the police, believe it or not. I worked in a department called the IT division. A department so top secret that most people don't know about it. And the particular department that I was involved in were responsible for finding bad guys online, let's just say. And when I say finding bad guys, I mean the P word, okay? That's what we're talking about. And that was where I worked for a while. Now, after I left that place, and I kind of left on bad terms actually, but that's another story. But after I left, I was approached by somebody who worked there. I was approached informally. It was actually a guy I used to have lunch with. And long story short, maybe I should tell you the full story in another video. But long story short, I got invited to join this network. This was an informal thing, non-paid actually. And it was I'd love to tell you it was a secret society and it was all voodoo and woo-woo, but it wasn't. It was really just a network of experts, let's just say, from all over the world. Some of them worked in, there's a really nice car. Does anybody know what kind of car that is? Anyway, so this network I was in, some of them worked in big tech, some of them worked for various governments. There was also a lot of security experts. Me, I'm just a web developer. I'm definitely not a hacker or a genius or anything like that. This was in the early days of PHP, and I was one of the first commercial PHP developers in the UK. We're going back about 20 years here, and that was, I could do a whole thing on how I got the phone call, but it's hard to imagine that PHP was new at one point, but it was. And I remember just launching or building and launching various test websites, and for whatever reason, another nice car, Porsche, for whatever reason somebody spotted it. I got a phone call and invited to go work for the police, you know. Go figure. Anyway, like I say, after I left, I got invited to join this network. I wasn't in it for very long. I actually had a severe case of intruder symptom. What is it they call it? Intruder complex or something? I don't know. But at that time, I ended up starting a web development agency, and that was taking up all of my time. So I never really did much for this network at all. Had a few trips to London and stuff like that, but I was never really an active member. Anyway, we'll go this way. That was a long time ago, a very, very long time ago. somebody got in touch with me this week. And this person who got in touch with me tells me that he's a member of this network and that they're taking an interest in what's going on. And so the way that they see it is that they're not a political organisation and they're not interested in ever becoming political, you know. People are welcome to vote for whomever they like. There's no obligation to like Charlie Kirk or anything, right? You can express yourself freely and it's all fine. Everything is beautiful. But when people post cowardly, really malicious and cruel comments from the apparent safety of some anonymous social media profile, this is not acceptable, you know. Now, the social media companies are kind of powerless to deal with it, and I think that they're overwhelmed as well. They just don't have the resources. And so, what I've been told is that there are people looking into this, and they're considering the possibility of setting up an online resource that lets people report on these types of malicious and cruel and really unethical messages that are coming in. Messages that glorify violence and that gloat and celebrate the death of somebody like Charlie Kirk. And they've just had enough, you know. So anyway, I've been asked if I'd be willing to help build this online resource. And the idea would be that if you find any of that type of content on the web, you would take a screenshot or maybe post a URL or just something, and then you'd submit it. And then what would happen is people from the network that I speak of would look into it. And what are they going to do? Two things. They're going to identify these people, and then they're going to shine a very, very bright and blinding light in their direction. Now, this happens to be a topic that I know a little bit about. You've heard me say before, none of us are anonymous online. I'm not anonymous. I mean, you might think you're anonymous, but you're not, you know? And so, there are people out there who have the resources and the skill set to identify these shysters, you know? And from a legal perspective, I know that that's covered as well, because it's funny, we've got gear here from Iceland, and Iceland is a very important country because Iceland falls with the scope of EU law and US law. So let's imagine that somebody starts posting this glorification of violent stuff. Now, let's stress, folks, people are allowed to express themselves. You're allowed to have a political opinion, right? I'm talking about the stuff that's glorifying violence and encouraging the type of thing that happened with Charlie Kirk. So, the idea is you would launch the website in Iceland. I know the name of the hosting company and everything, I've dealt with them. And I know who you would register the domain name with. And the fact of the matter is that you would be legally untouchable. And then when it happens, you would just publish on the web, here is such and such, and here's what this person said, and this content is now staying online for 20 years. Now see, if you did that, I guarantee people would modify their behaviour incredibly quickly, astonishingly quickly. And in fact, some of you have seen me do this type of thing before. I've had a little side gig. I help people who are being bullied on the web, you know. And what I've noticed is that the most powerful tool an online bully has is their ability to remain safely anonymous. And the moment you take that away from them, I've personally witnessed this more than once. The moment that they suddenly realise that they're not anonymous and they can be held to account, let me tell you folks, you suddenly enjoy a spectacular, miraculous change of personality. So, now you've heard the idea. Thank you for listening. The question is it a good idea or is it a bad idea? Please use capital letters and just write very clearly in capital letters, good idea or bad idea. I'll let you do that for the next 30 seconds and then I'll see what you have to say and I'll make my decision. So I'm asking you, is it a good idea to build an online resource that lets people submit screenshots and so on, effectively reporting people who glorify things like the assassination of Charlie Kirk? Is it a good idea to build this resource? Is it a good idea to then activate the network, let's say, and to hold those people to account? That is the question, and I'm looking at the comments, and if nobody comments, I'll assume it's a bad idea. All right, I can see. Wow, I'm surprised. I am surprised. I'm seeing good. Let's see. Hello everybody. I'm looking through the comments. So Gia says it's a good idea. Thank you. And thank you for the capital letters. It really helps. Thank you, Gia. Good idea. I think that looks like Duncan. Thank you. It's a great idea. We have good idea. What about etc.? Would you be inviting trouble? Thank you, Keith. That's a good question. And we have another says great idea. Well, that's a good question. So Keith raises a question to do with legalities. As I was saying a moment ago, the idea is that you launch the website in a geographic location that is out with the scope of EU, UK and US legal jurisdiction. And I'll give you the location. The location is Iceland, actually. So believe me, those bases are well covered. Even the hosting company, there's a company, I think they're still going, they're called Nearly Free Speech. Nearly Free Speech. I think they're based in Iceland. I've dealt with them once before. So the idea is that you would put this online asset there and that would be that, you know. But the main thing would be to act as a deterrent. I don't want to get in the revenge game. All I'm interested in doing is encouraging decent and upstanding behaviour, you know. And I think that it's really what the social media companies probably would be dealing with if only they had the resources, but they don't. They do not have the resources. And I'm telling you, and I'm not looking for attention or applause here, but I know for a fact that there are people who know how to do this type of thing. Some of you have seen me demonstrate these skills on the channel once or twice. And it's possible, you know. Now, for me personally, I'm not sure how involved I could get, because I've just spent a long time working on an open source framework, and I'm sort of trying to financially climb back to the light here. But they did ask if I would be interested in assisting with this online resource. And like I say, the idea is, if you see something, and by the way, might I add, I have seen nothing. I haven't been looking. The very thought makes me sick. But I understand people have said that apparently there are legions of people who are basically dancing on the grave of Charlie Kirk. They think that they're anonymous, and they're not, you know. There are situations where it's possible to be perfectly anonymous on the web, but to pull that off, you would need to go to really, really extreme lengths. And like I say, I worked for the cops. This was the department I was involved in, and I know what I'm talking about. Did I ever tell you about why I left that job, by the way? Quite a story. What happened is I headed in one day and I was asked to go through a gazillion PDFs and convert them to HTML pages. And it was nothing top secret or anything or even interesting. It was, they had an intranet system, and they just happened to have a massive amount of PDFs that they wanted on the intranet, you know. And so they gave me this job to do, and it was a real downer. And I knew that it was going to take me about 2 months, and I just did not want to do this. Now remember, this was the early days of PHP. These days there's libraries everywhere, but back then there wasn't. And so I looked at this horrible job that I had, and I thought there has to be a better way. So I got a little USB pen, I put some PDFs on this USB, headed home, and I built a little script that did simple string replacement. And you know, I don't want to over dramatize it, but basically I wrote this little script that converted the PDFs, you know. So the next morning I headed in, and I thought I was a genius, and I thought, man, they are gonna love me. And I says, great news, folks. You know that miserable job you had? Well, the good news is we don't need to wait 2 months because I wrote this script. And again, I thought I was a hero. But they had a different opinion. By the way, this used to be my shop. It's now a barber's. But if you go to Google Maps, it's 156 Battlefield. Oh no, hang on, 58 Battlefield Road. Yeah, I used to rent that out and just work from it. Anyway, yeah, so I built this thing that converted PDFs into web pages, and I thought it was kind of cool at the time. I mean, everybody watching this could probably do it easily nowadays, but back then I thought it was kind of cool. And then I got a tap on the shoulder, and I got called into the Moni chief's office. She was actually a female. And you know how in the Starsky and Hutch and all of that, the police chief is always really moany, really grouchy, right? Well, it turns out that's exactly what they're like in real life. And so I got the bollocking of a lifetime for this, you know. And it was at that moment when I suddenly realised that I didn't want to work for the government. I didn't want to work for, the phrase we use in the UK is the public sector. And I realised that the private sector rewarded innovation, but the public sector punished innovation. And suddenly I realised the whole business model. It's like in the case of the department I was in, I don't have access to the numbers, but let's just say for argument's sake they had a budget of £6 million to last them, I don't know, I'll just pluck a number out of thin air, say 6 months. So some guy comes along and writes a script that does all of the work instantly. That might be great from a development point of view. But from a business point of view, you've just screwed up the whole model, you know? They actually have incentives to do things slowly and inefficiently. Same goes for hospitals, by the way. And it's funny, I've only ever told a few people that story. And when I've described it, I've often said, here's how I got fired when I was working for the police. But as I thought back to it and really set my mind back, I never actually did get fired. They never said you're fired. But they might as well have, you know. And I made my mind up, I'm just going to get out of here. And what happened was, as luck would have it, I was very lucky because a car leasing company by the name of First Vehicle Leasing, well, one of the guys there spotted my stuff online and he phoned up and says, would you like to work here? And I says, absolutely. And then I moved away from the police work and just started building websites for the motor trade, you know. So that's how I did that, and now I'm going to try and read some comments. Let's have a look here. I'm trying my best. So, great idea. Okay, we got that. Another great idea. Thank you. Thank you for the capitals. How would you combat faked reporting that? Oh, it's so difficult. Something, I can't read it. It's just a thought. They would have blah, 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 take report. Okay, I try my best to read it and my eyeballs are killing me. Now, forgive me, just so that you know, your font size is probably, I'm going to say about 2.5 millimeters on this phone. So I apologise. I think the message was, how would you mitigate fake reports? And the answer is, I don't really know, but I think there would have to be a URL and there would have to be a screenshot. Now, if somebody, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, but if somebody sent in a screenshot and says, look at this terrible thing somebody said, and then you go to the website and the screenshot has gone, perhaps it's been removed, right? Well, you know, I'm not Keir Starmer, right? You have to say fair enough, they took it down. That's great, you know, it's fantastic. In fact, that's the ideal outcome, to get them to take it down. So I suppose the answer to your question, and I am thinking out loud here, would be that if somebody submitted a false report or a screenshot or something, and the thing either never existed or did exist but got taken down, that would be fantastic. That would be, you know, crack open the champagne. I love it. I think that would be my answer. Does that sound reasonable? So that would be that, you know. Again, I appreciate the feedback though, and I'm sort of surprised. I didn't think that you would think it was a good idea, but so far, people seem to think it's a good idea. What I think I might do is have a conversation with the Count who may be watching. Again, I don't want to sound too dramatic, but some of the people who are involved in these networks, they don't like, well, they like to be anonymous themselves. So if you hear me say I'll talk to the count, it's just happens to be somebody, you know. Actually, I've mentioned him before. So I'll run it past him and see what he says, you know. And who knows, it might happen. It would certainly be a fun project, and I don't know if it would kick off though. And there's a lot of technicalities I'd have to figure out as well. One thing is for sure, none of us are anonymous. I'm not anonymous. And you would be amazed at how easy it is to do that type of work, you know. I've done it a few times. I did a floor plan. I had a professional online bully going after me. And he was saying, so what are you going to do? You're going to show me a picture of my house and all that. He had really bent over backwards to remain anonymous. And I think it was about a month ago in one of the live streams. You'll need to look around. But I drew a floor plan of his home on camera, blindfolded. And then I was able to write in the number of square foot. And people say, how do you do that? How do you do that? Folks, it's easy. People leave clues everywhere, you know. But in the case of that particular guy, I can exclusively reveal that I had tip-offs coming in from some of his closest friends who were saying, here's who he is, here's his address, here's blah, blah, blah. And I was like, look, it's okay, guys, I'm on top of it. I know, we've already got all that information. It took 12 hours. But if that guy had any clue of how everybody around about him is backstabbing him, it would be a bad week for him, you know. I don't know what to do with that information. I'm still sitting on it, but let's not start waffling. Right, okay. Yes, it's a wonderful idea. Thank you. I'm trying to read it. I can't read the next bit. There are a few kinks, yep, but the concept's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, well, I appreciate that. Okay, well, you have responded positively. Again, just so that I know what's going to happen. I'm going to stop this darn video in a minute, and I'm going to say I shouldn't have said that. And I'm going to say I've said too much, I'm sounding arrogant, I'm misleading people, I'm making promises that I'll never keep, and I'm going to delete this live stream, right? I've been here a gazillion times, but I don't want to delete it. So while the live stream's still running, and for the future version of me who might be looking at this later or thinking about this, for the future version of me, let me be very clear, folks. The stuff that I'm describing is really not as mysterious and fabulous or something or exciting as it sounds. Yes, I did work for the police. You'd never believe it. Yes, I did work in a department that was responsible for finding bad people on the web. And I did work with some people who were really good at this type of thing. But let me be perfectly clear. I'm just a PHP guy, you know. I build contact us forms and stuff. So do not ever let me mislead you into thinking that I'm James Bond or something, or some kind of, hacker genius or anything. I'm not. It's not my skill set. I have a few little party tricks, but it's like nothing. I'm just a guy who happened to work there. And the only reason I got invited into that network in the first place was because, as I said, I'm going to just say effectively fired because of the PDF thing. And what I was told when I got the phone call is that it was noticed, you know. But anyway, definitely, this is definitely not some kind of shadow-lurking hacker type character. I'm just a web developer. I'm just a PHP guy. It's no big deal. And I'm just letting you know what happened, okay? So folks, I think I'm going to leave it at that. I had said earlier on, if anybody comes up to me and says, "Are you the Glasgow Equalizer?" I'll give them 100 quid. Thankfully, it never happened. But I'll keep my eye on the like button, and if people like these videos and respond positively, we'll keep doing this. And who knows, maybe if I do enough of these, we'll finally get to have a wee bit of fun and see if we can... I'll do like a walk of the whole city and see if we can get somebody coming up and asking the question, and we could give them the 100. That'd be a wee bit of fun. All right, folks, have a fabulous weekend. I really appreciate your company, and you know what? I think we would all do well if we took a little break from social media. And I refer, of course, to all of the negative news. I think it would be very healthy if some of us took a break from that this weekend. Anyway, take care, and thanks for all of the feedback and the comments. Thank you, and I can certainly read that. Good night. Thank you, thank you. I think the name's Duncan. I'm struggling to see it. If it is, thank you, Duncan, and if I'm wrong, I apologise. All right, take care, folks. To everybody who was here, Gear, and I think we had Keith and all of the others. I cannot even read the names. Bless you all, my friends, and I'll see you later. Bye.